even when I'm down. Got my head in the clouds and my feet on the ground. I got big dreams, gonna make them true. Yeah, we got big dreams here in the Genius Lab, and I'm so happy to have you here today. Toby Christensen here, and we're moving. We are in the Genius Lab studio where we help you realize your greatness, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about negative emotions and how they can be cleared. Because one thing about realizing your greatness is having negative emotions that pull you down never help you realize your greatness. As a matter of fact, they work completely counter to that end. And what I want to talk about today is a specific emotion, okay, or feeling, and which is anxiety. One of the things, especially with this whole COVID thing that happened just a year ago, like a year ago right now, I remember here in the state of Ohio, a complete shutdown. Restaurants closed, gyms. I mean, it was like the whole world stopped. And it was eerie. It was really strange. And the thing that I found with a lot of my clients is there was a lot of anxiety. Anxiety is caused by uncertainty. It's caused by worry. It's kind of funny because when you think about worry and you think about anxiety, what are you really doing? You're actually putting a lot of energy towards something that doesn't exist. Okay. If you think about what you worry about, right? It's like, well, is this person going to call, or are they going to follow through with their promise? Or will I get the whatever? Will I get the interview? Will I get the job? Will I get the car? Will I get the whatever? And the anxiety is about wondering about what hasn't happened yet. Okay. Sometimes it's, one of my big triggers for anxiety is when someone says, we need to talk. I immediately reflect on what could I possibly have done wrong, or how could I have offended this person that I don't realize that I did. And now it's a lot better than it used to be. But, at certain times in my life, it's been pretty intense, simply because as a child, I was constantly under the barrage of a, let's say, unstable and reactive mother who you never knew when she was going to freak out about something that you didn't do and blame it on you, or go into a giant rage about something that you knew nothing about. And that happened with my sisters. It happened with me. And so it created a pattern. And I remember when I was working in Park City. I used to live in Park City, Utah. Just loved that. Loved Park City. It was so awesome. Skiing all the time, mountain biking. It's heaven. But I remember my assistant at the time saying, we really need to talk. She called me up. We really need to talk. And I remember, like, for 2 days worrying about what she was going to talk to me about. And actually what it turned out, she had this really good idea for another workshop on Kauai, so I could spend more time in Hawaii, which is my favorite place in the world. And I started laughing, and she said, what's so funny? And I'm like, well, I've been worrying for 2 days. I've been totally wrapped up in anxiety about how I hurt your feelings or what I might have done to piss you off because you said we need to talk. And she started laughing, and she said, no, we need to talk because we need to do this workshop. And it was really amazing and hilarious because I got to pick on myself a little bit and realize that, you're always learning, right? You never graduate. You can be the teacher of thousands of people and still you learn every day. And the thing that is so exciting is by becoming aware, you can deal with things. And one of the things that I've worked on with the emotional clearing technique is the eradication of emotions that prevent me from realizing my greatness. Sometimes I get caught up in things, worries about, I just recently bought a car, and that is not one of my favorite things to do. But this time, through the advice of a very good friend, I just went in and stated my case, and here's what I want. Here's how much time I have. If you can do it, great, we've got a deal. If you can't, we don't, and that's fine. And everything went really well. And what ended up happening is I got a much nicer car than I expected, and lowered my car payments. And it was like, wow. But in the interim, what I found was that I was suffering a minor anxiety, wondering if the deal was going to go through. Sometimes when I'm doing a music project or a video project, it's like, oh man, am I going to close the deal? Am I going to get funding? And rather than staying positive and of course, this one way or another, this is going to work out, and understanding that the very best situation is going to reveal itself, because that's how I roll. I sometimes get caught in the anxiety of, is it going to fund? I have a predetermined idea that this is the best person to fund the project, and sometimes when I have pushed the envelope, when I have forced my hand, so to speak, and made the deal happen, down the road shortly, I regret, like, why did I push so hard? I should have seen actually I did see the red flags, but I wanted the outcome so badly that I didn't pay attention to them. And then I'm stuck with a executive producer or something that I'm not in harmony with. And then other times, like, people will just show up. Like, yeah, I want to fund that. This is important to me, and I'm all in. And they are 100% behind the project. They make things happen. They make it really easy, and are pleasantly surprised when you include them. It's like, hey, you want to be on a song, or you want to sing, or you want to play guitar, or whatever. They're like, wow, I just thought I was funding this, but now I get to be part of it. And then but that interim period is when the anxiety comes in. So the thing about anxiety from a psychological point of view is so many times it's referred to as a disorder. And the symptoms of anxiety, are restlessness and a feeling of being on edge, okay? Uncontrollable feelings of worry, increased irritability, you get like, you're jumpy at things. It's hard to stay focused and concentrate when you have anxiety, and then sleep is like next to impossible. Sometimes it's falling asleep because this stuff's rattling. Sometimes it's waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning with monkey mind when this stuff just starts rolling through your head and won't stop. So sometimes extreme anxiety can cause panic attacks and certain kinds of phobias. I mean, it's funny because it's like oftentimes anxiety is completely irrational fear. Like everything is working out. Why would you worry about it falling through the cracks? Well, here's where the emotional clearing technique comes in. Because a lot of times when we are worried about something that we have no control over, it actually has to do with something in our past, either some kind of traumatic event or some kind of disappointment or trigger of some emotion that triggered some emotional reaction that is being reactivated. If we don't deal with it and we don't remove it, it continues to sink its teeth into our body, into our being, into our mental health. And basically what happens is we end up, in a place of anxiety. So one of the things we do with the emotional clearing technique, or emotional management process, it's the same thing, different name, is we work through the first occurrence we work our way back in our timeline of life, back to the place where we first remember or first become aware of whatever it was that was either a disappointment. I remember for me, one of my big things was my dad and I always used to go fishing. And I remember one time when I was about 8 years old, waking up and it was light out. And I knew that my dad had did not wake me up to go fishing. And I was so disappointed because we used to get up at like 5 a.m. and it was pitch black. And I remember when Dad would wake me up when it was dark, I knew we were getting ready to go fishing, and the sun would just start to rise about the time that we got in the boat and got out on Puget Sound. And so I remember waking up and it was light out, and I was so disappointed because I knew that we weren't going fishing. So it was funny because then as I took that and then I moved forward, I realized that I projected that onto other figures of authority. And as I began to remove those negative emotions, the anxiety began to relieve. And what happens now when I have a situation where someone has made a commitment or a promise and rather than it hasn't occurred yet, the check hasn't cleared the bank or whatever it is, they always say, a deal isn't done till you get the check. Well, the deal isn't done till the check clears the bank. But rather than being worried and rather than allowing anxiety to come in, what happens is now I know that if it flips, if it goes sideways, that's not the best thing for me. And I have confidence in the universe that everything will work out just fine. Now, it doesn't mean I don't do my very best and I don't I don't prepare, and I still have to work at it. And I still sometimes feel stressed, like, did I cover all the bases? Do I have everything covered? Did I lay out the program properly? That sort of thing. That's different. That's different than unhelpful anxiety. That's taking care of business, okay? And not having anxiety is not a reason to be lazy. In other words, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to let the chips fall where they may. Well, if you don't do your job, they won't fall in your direction simply because you didn't prepare properly. You didn't deliver the right message, so on and so forth. So it's not an excuse to be lazy. It's not an excuse to not be thorough in your work. What it is it's a reason to do the very best that you possibly can, and then realize that the outcome of that action is not in your control. The outcome of that reaction is in the transaction of whatever the agreement is. So you present your case, you put it forward, and then see what happens. And then work with that situation. For me, because I do a lot of music production, I'm putting out proposals for executive producers, people to fund these different programs. Sometimes it's an environmental program. Sometimes one of them is a plastic waste with a company called Final Cycles. They're eradicating plastic waste in the world. It's a huge problem that a lot of people don't really know about. And if they did, they'd probably be really anxious. But and so I'm constantly looking for people to fund the tremendous amount of work that goes into putting an album together or music for a documentary or so on and so forth. But the thing that's cool about the emotional clearing technique is when I find myself stuck, when I find myself worrying, when I find anxiety coming in and taking over, that's when I get back to basics. Have I done all that I can? Have I prepared adequately? Have I done everything I know to do to have this situation resolve in my favor? And if I have, then I just let it go and realize that if it happens, I'm in the right spot, I'm with the right person, it's a match. If it doesn't, I realize that, you know what? There's someone else that I'll pitch this to that's going to love it. because it always happens. So, anxiety is a killer that can really throw you for a loop. And by going through the emotional clearing technique, you can be free from anxiety. You can realize your greatness. And as always, keep looking up.